You're watching YouTube, the cable access of the 21st century. It's Wednesday, it's 4 p.m. where I am, and it's time to talk about movies and answer your questions. Welcome to Dan's World. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dan's World. Can you see me? Can you hear me? That's always the question at the top of my mind. Looks like I have the right microphone connected this week. That's always a bonus. We were off last week. I was snake-proof in the house. So the house is snake-proof now. No more snakes, which is great. I was a couple minutes late today because I was prepping the main story that we're going to talk about, which is the replacement for Stephen Colbert on CBS. It may not be who you think, because I doubt anybody would have thought that they would replace Stephen Colbert with the show that's replacing him. So we're going to talk about that, what that show is, who Byron Allen is, because you may not be familiar with the name Byron Allen, but he has been around the entertainment industry for decades. So we're going to dive into that. We're also going to talk about Paramount. They have, they're in search of a new movie studio head, because Jeff Shell, who was the head of the Paramount studio, is now no longer the head of the Paramount studio. We'll talk about why that happened and why this isn't the first time that this has happened to Jeff Shell. I'm excited to get into that, and I'm excited to get into your questions as well. So if you have a question that you want to ask me, you can leave it in the chat. I do try to look at the chat, but I have a lot of people that are commenting as the show goes on. I try to grab what I can during the show. If you want to make sure that I answer your question, then you can leave a super chat. I will definitely get to your question today. I do request, because I keep forgetting to do this at the top of the show, I do request, with peace and love, in the spirit of Ringo Starr, no ranking questions, please, just because it's difficult for me to come up with that off the top of my head, and I don't like dead air while I'm sitting here like a dummy trying to go, oh man, hang on. Well, what are the 80s films that star Rutger Hauer that I love the most? Other than Blade Runner, of course. So with peace and love, no ranking questions, but I'll be happy to answer any other question that you have. Before we get into your questions, though, let's get into the main story today, and that is the show that is replacing the late night with Stephen Colbert on CBS. It is not another late night show host. It is not a new TV show, a new format. It's a show that has been sporadically on CBS for the last few years, filling in where it's needed, and also a show that has been in syndication for many, many years, more than that. And we'll talk about what syndication is. The show that's replacing the late night with Stephen Colbert, or the late show with Stephen Colbert, I should say, on CBS is called Comics Unleashed with Byron Allen. And if you've never heard of Comics Unleashed with Byron Allen, let's give you a little bit of primer on that show. First of all, who is Byron Allen? Well, as I mentioned, Byron Allen has been around the entertainment industry for decades. And despite what you might want to say about his programming, I have ultimate respect for him as a businessman. He was a teenage stand-up comic who appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson back in 1979 at 18 years old. I think at that time he was the youngest comedian ever to appear on that program. That transitioned into more on-camera work, more stand-up jobs. He had a syndicated talk show in the 80s and 90s. And in 1993, he started his own production company, which I think I've mentioned on this channel before because the name just amuses me, called Entertainment Studios Television. That's what the name ultimately ended up being. Entertainment Studios made syndicated programming, largely junket interviews with celebrities that were packaged into a show that Allen had where he interviewed different celebrities. Now, syndication. What is syndication? Because that is how Entertainment Studios and Byron Allen really made the bulk of their money at the beginning. In the traditional network format, you have a show that you want to make. You go to a network. The network pays for you to make that show, or pays you to make that show. They sell advertising. You have a time slot. You have network executives that you answer to. Every week you're on at the same time, and you are also subject to network executive oversight. Syndication is a little bit different. A syndicated program, you basically make the program and then you sell the program to individual stations. You're not usually selling it to a network. Sometimes the network will buy a syndicated program to fill in here and there, but a lot of times you're going station to station saying, hey, I have this program. I want to buy the time slot so that I can air at this time and, The advertising I can handle. Sometimes there's a different arrangement, but it's basically you don't work for a network. You are out there selling your show. You're basically a network show salesman. And syndicated shows, that's why so many syndicated shows like Siskel and Ebert, for example, way back when, used to be a syndicated program, which is why in every different market, Siskel and Ebert was never on at the same time. Where I grew up, Siskel and Ebert was on late on Sunday nights, like at 11:30. In some markets, Siskel and Ebert was on Saturday afternoon. In some markets, it was on Sunday afternoon. That's because the show was syndicated, and each individual station would say, okay, you can air on our channel, and they would program when it would air. And that's when the show aired. Star Trek: The Next Generation was a very successful syndicated program. At that time, one of the only, hour-long dramas that was syndicated. But again, that show didn't necessarily have a fixed time slot nationwide. It would air at different times. I think in my local market, it aired at 6 o'clock on Sunday nights. And then it would air also reruns after the local news, because I think that my local station would buy Star Trek: The Next Generation, that they would let them have that time slot as well. So it really is just kind of filling in these gaps. It's harder than traditional programming because you have to go out and hustle and sell. But if you are the producer of a successful syndicated program or a block of syndicated programming, then it can also be very lucrative because you're making a lot of deals and you are participating more in the success of individual shows. And Byron Allen's model of syndication has proven to be very successful for him. Entertainment Studios reportedly is a multi-billion-dollar company. Byron Allen has been able to invest in other things. He owns the Weather Channel. I mean, he literally bought the weather. That's how successful syndication has been to Byron Allen. One of Byron Allen's shows is called Comics Unleashed with Byron Allen. It started in 2016. It was syndicated for 10 years before it ceased production it started in 2006, ran for 10 years and ceased production in 2016. It was brought back for a few months back in 2023 by CBS, who basically gave Byron Allen the time slot after Stephen Colbert to fill in the gap between James Corden leaving and After Midnight, which was James Corden's replacement show. The episodes weren't ready yet because of the writer's strike. So Comics Unleashed filled that hour-long time slot. It was put back in that time slot on CBS last year when After Midnight ended. And now the show is taking over Stephen Colbert's slot. And another Byron Allen produced show, a game show called Funny You Should Ask, is airing after Comics Unleashed. So basically, Byron Allen's programming is going to have full reign over CBS's late night slate. And you may be asking yourself, well, what is Comics Unleashed? Maybe you haven't seen it, even though it has been airing in a consistent network time slot off and on for the last few years. Comics Unleashed is a panel show which is hosted by Byron Allen. He comes out, he says a few words, he goes and takes a seat, and every episode he has 4 comedians that sit on set with him, and they just talk. Now, this is not a show like Politically Incorrect, for example, with Bill Maher, which had a similar format with some comedians, but they talked about the news and politics and everything else. Comics Unleashed is kind of the opposite. Byron Allen has reportedly put a directive in place that the comedians are not to talk about anything controversial and also not to talk about anything timely, because the goal of Comics Unleashed is for the show to be evergreen, which means that you could run any episode at any time and nobody in the audience would ever be able to tell when that episode was produced. Often Comics Unleashed will run a newly produced episode back to back with an episode that was made at some point in the past, and you can't even tell. I was actually looking at the Comics Unleashed YouTube channel today, and there were some episodes that were released this week and over the last few weeks that I watched bits of. I can't tell you whether those episodes were aired or shot last month or 5 years ago. And that is the intention. That's what Byron Allen wants, because he wants Comics Unleashed to have an entire catalog of episodes that he can program wherever he wants, whenever he wants, and not have to worry about either a reference making that particular episode dated or something that might make advertisers uncomfortable with supporting the show. Completely non-controversial, completely non-timely. There's a clip that I'd seen before that I saw resurfaced when this news broke with Norm Macdonald, who is one of my favorite comedians of all time, rest in peace. talking to a guest and talking about appearing on Comics Unleashed. And he said in that perfect norm delivery, he's like, Comics Unleashed, you couldn't be more leashed. And his point was that there were actually many restrictions on what a comedian could or couldn't say because of the tone and the tenor of the show. But that is now what is going to be on after your late local news on CBS. And what this allows CBS to do basically is to kind of wash their hands of late night TV. The model that Byron Allen is operating under with this show reportedly is something called a time buy. Sorry if I hit the mic stand there. It's called a time buy. What it basically means is that he, Byron Allen, and his company, Entertainment Studios, will buy that time slot from CBS. So basically say, okay, you're going to put my show on at 12:30 or 11:30, whatever it is. Here's some money so that I own the slot, and I will take on the responsibility of selling advertising. Now, that would also mean that the profits go largely to Byron Allen and to Entertainment Studios, or entirely. But it also means that CBS has some cash in hand. And remember, the reason on paper, the reason publicly that they said that they canceled Stephen Colbert is that the show was too expensive to produce, that it lost tens of millions of dollars a year. Now they have, for Colbert's replacement, a show that essentially doesn't cost them anything. It makes them money based on the model that syndicated programming uses. And it's also completely non-controversial. It's not going to anger anybody at home. It's not going to anger anybody in the White House. It's not going to anger anybody at the FCC. It is safe programming and profitable. And if you were going to tell me the two things that CBS under Paramount now probably prioritizes when it comes to broadcast television, profitable and safe would probably be the two things that are at the top of my list. And this, of course, is a big boost for Byron Allen. Obviously, to consistently have this slot every single night right after the late local news is a big boost in exposure for him, especially syndicated programming often airs at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. You may have seen Comics Unleashed in the past at like 2 or 3 a.m. because the networks didn't have anything to put there, and your local station said, well, I need to put something on this late at night. And so they'll just put in Comics Unleashed, and they can put in any episode they want because that's how the show works. But Byron Allen has also proven in the past that he will fight ferociously to make sure that his programming is on equal footing with other programming that's airing on networks and cable stations and carriers around the country. Byron Allen has actually been very active in taking what he thinks are protective steps for Entertainment Studios. Recently, he settled a $10 billion discrimination lawsuit against McDonald's. He alleged that McDonald's kept a separately funded and lesser funded advertising budget for programming that was aimed at Black audiences. So basically that they were spending less money specifically on programming for Black audiences. That lawsuit actually was approved to go to court. A judge declared that it was a close call, but he thought that the case should go to trial in order to play out in court. McDonald's ended up settling that lawsuit out of court, and it's one of many similar lawsuits that Byron Allen has filed in the past. He has filed lawsuits against Comcast. He's filed lawsuits against Charter. He's filed lawsuits against AT&T, alleging that those companies refused to pick up Entertainment Studios programming due to racial discrimination. And all of those lawsuits have been settled out of court. None of them went to trial. There were a lot of years of appeals and reversals and wins and losses. It actually went to the Supreme Court. There was a 9-0 decision in one of Byron Allen's lawsuits against Comcast that went to the Supreme Court. The justices ruled unanimously that in his suit against Comcast, Byron Allen, would have to prove that Comcast excluded his programming from their platforms on the exclusive basis of race. It was called the but-for judgment. Essentially, that they would have aired Allen's programming, but for the fact that he was Black, that he was African American. So it basically set a very high bar to prove that it was racial discrimination. And in the end, like I said, that was settled out of court. But Byron Allen is a very successful businessman. You can say what you want about his programming. And listen, I watched several episodes of Comics Unleashed. I don't think it's particularly funny. It's definitely not provocative in any way. It is the safest possible option. But he is somebody who has built an empire literally from the ground up and has fought to protect that empire uh, in courts and really just out there every day selling what he does. So I've got great respect for the guy as a businessman. I just don't particularly think that the programming that he produces is very good. I mean, when you look at the YouTube channel for Comics Unleashed, the average episode that gets released on YouTube gets 1,000 to 1,500 views, which means that I can say sitting here that this show on YouTube actually gets better ratings than the online presence for the show that's going to take over the 11:35 p.m. slot on CBS, at least right now. So, it's a small victory and doesn't really mean anything, but I'll take a moral victory at this point. The point being that Comics Unleashed isn't exactly a late night juggernaut. And my big question with this is what the affiliates are going to have to say. And we talked about affiliates on the show before and on the channel before. The stations, your local news stations that are affiliated or affiliates of CBS will often, get local ad rates. So, you have national ads that are sold on programming, but each station also sells advertising time to local businesses. And if ratings drop on network programming, then that means that the local ad rates drop. And if the ratings are weak for Comics Unleashed, then I wonder if the affiliates are going to start complaining to CBS that their late night local news is being dragged down by the fact that people aren't staying tuned because they don't want to watch what comes on afterwards, or their local ad rates for late night television are being dragged down because viewership has dropped. Remember, the affiliates played a part, not the only part, but played a part in Conan being fired from The Tonight Show because his ratings were lower than Jay Leno's. And NBC, I think, was already looking to maybe bring Jay Leno back anyway. But Jay Leno's show at 10 o'clock Eastern time was a low-rated show, and the affiliates complained because it was dragging down ratings for their local newscasts. And that helped to form the basis of Jay Leno coming back and replacing Conan on The Tonight Show. Affiliates do wield power when it comes to network television, but network television is also in a much different place now than it was even when Conan and the whole Tonight Show thing went down. And I think really more than anything, CBS is getting exactly what they wanted. A cost-effective, basically instantly profitable, safe option for late night television. There's a lot that I think went into this decision. Part of it is I just don't think CBS cares about late night anymore. And this is part of an overall trend. It's not entirely devoted or specifically aimed at Stephen Colbert and politics and everything like that. I think that does play a part. I do. I don't think that you could look at what the FCC has been saying and doing, the fact that they are openly lobbying for David Ellison, who now owns CBS through Paramount Skydance, to be in further control of media. Politics absolutely played a part in this decision, but I think part of it too is that late night television generally is in decline along with the rest of linear television. And this gets a huge expense off the books at CBS, by the way, while Paramount is going through this incredibly costly merger that they're going to have to figure out how to pay down these tens of hundreds of billions of dollars of debt that they're accruing. And this is an instant win for them. So once Stephen Colbert goes off the air later this year, I think it's next month, then look for Comics Unleashed with Byron Allen after your late local news. Maybe it'll catch on. Maybe that's what people want. Maybe they want safe and non-controversial. Maybe it will be an alternative to the more politically charged shows that Jimmy Kimmel and even Jimmy Fallon, by comparison, do. We'll see. It's safe. Safe would be the word that I would describe for this. But it is sort of a bit of a whiplash to go from Stephen Colbert to Comics Unleashed with Byron Allen. But this could very well be the future of late night, as Kimmel, if Kimmel decides to hang it up in the next few years, and I think he probably will. I think this very well could be what late night looks like in the next 10 years, where networks just say, hey, these things are so expensive. Our hosts are aging out. Audiences are leaving. Let's just give this time over to lower cost programming, or even give the time back to the affiliates so they can fill it with whatever local programming or syndicated programming they want, because this is a huge cost off of our balance sheets. So yeah, Comics Unleashed, now the standard bearer for the 11:30 slot over at CBS. All right. The other story I wanted to talk about, and it is also related to Paramount, regards the head of Paramount Global, basically the head of the Paramount movie studio, Jeff Shell. Jeff Shell was hired by David Ellison to be the head of Paramount and to oversee the studio and other things when the Paramount Skydance merger happened. But Jeff Shell is now out as the president of Paramount. He announced today that he is stepping down from his position. And this follows a lawsuit that was filed against Jeff Shell. This lawsuit came from a professional gambler named R.J. Cipriani, who had a business relationship with Jeff Shell that went sour. In the lawsuit, Cipriani accused Shell of sharing confidential information with him about Paramount, including that they were overpaying for Warner Brothers and could pay a lot less if they just waited. Cipriani also said that Shell shared details about the company's deal with UFC. Shell will, of course, become a member of Paramount's board because that's just how things work in corporate America. Jeff Shell, as I mentioned, was hired by David Ellison in 2024 to be the head of Paramount after the Paramount Skydance merger. This move was met with criticism, given that the previous year in 2023, Jeff Shell was fired as the head of NBC Universal. If you're wondering where you've heard that name before, that's because we covered this story here on the channel. He was fired as the head of NBC Universal after a CNBC anchor alleged that Shell had engaged in inappropriate behavior and sexual harassment, which means that Shell has now lost 2 studio head jobs over the course of 3 years. And is this shocking? No, not particularly. I mean, a lot of people, even people that weren't, anti-David Ellison or anti-Paramount or whatever, were pretty mystified by the fact that he hired Jeff Shell because of Shell's history, because of his past. It was a surprising move to me because it just seems like a liability that you've taken on, and he did prove to be a liability. But that is, isn't this just a microcosm of how the corporate culture works in so much of the country, which is that it doesn't matter what you did at your last job. It doesn't matter if you ran that company into bankruptcy. It doesn't matter if you got fired for this reason or that reason or whatever. If somebody determines that you could be of value or that you could make the company potentially $1 more than another candidate, they'll hire you because that's what it is solely driven by money. That is the only consideration. There are no other considerations. Past history, it doesn't matter. It's only about money. But this goes to show that sometimes that mentality of saying like, well, I don't care, whatever. Yeah, I'm sure, whatever. They said whatever in his last job, but we think he's going to make us a bunch of money, so we'll hire him and screw what everybody else thinks. Sometimes it is kind of good to consider the intangibles. Sometimes it is good to maybe look at the character of the person that you're hiring for this main job, because ultimately it's embarrassing for Paramount. It's embarrassing for David Ellison. It was a distraction when they were in the whole negotiation trying to get Warner Brothers and wrested away from Netflix. And they have to go back to the drawing board and now hire another head of the movie studio. It makes David Ellison look kind of incompetent. This is the first time he's ever been a studio head. His first hand-picked studio chief really doesn't even begin to start the job. And the time he was there wasn't really a whole lot of success. And now he's got to go back and find somebody else. So nobody really comes out of this looking good. And to me, this is how so many corporations end up shooting themselves in the foot, because they throw away everything about somebody, including past job performance, because they think that this person can maximize outcome. And the Q4 EBITDA can be over the Q1 EBITDA of 2023 versus the fiscal year, because that's the only language these people speak now. And it's a completely self-inflicted wound, because any logical person would say, when you're looking for a new studio head, hey, should we hire the guy that was fired from his last job for alleged sexual harassment? Or should we go with any number of other candidates who, and let's put this number one on their resume, have not been fired from previous jobs for alleged sexual harassment? And instead they went with the guy who's like, well, but he's a proven commodity. He'd still be there making money if he didn't, do all of the harassment stuff. So let's bring him into the fold. It's just so stupid. And that's what frustrates me. And I know that I often go on anti-corporate rants on this show, but that's because corporations keep doing dumb things. That's what drives me crazy about so many of these big corporations, especially as they become so focused on quarterly returns and unlimited growth, is They consistently make moves that they think are the most brilliant moves in the world. Look how smart we are. And they talk themselves and they give these complicated rationalizations for doing it. And yet the most non-corporate aligned person in the world, the idiots like me sitting at home in the chair, are the ones that can say, like, you just spent 30 minutes justifying this, but it's obvious why you shouldn't hire this guy. Like, you're bringing this guy into the fold when anybody in the world could just take a 5-minute look at this and say, this is probably a bad idea, or it's got the potential to be a bad idea. And it's the same thing of, like, every studio talking themselves into investing tens of billions of dollars into streaming services simultaneously. Jokers like me were out there saying, like, I don't know how this is going to work. It kind of seems like you're flooding the market and that there's not enough audience for all of you to succeed. And they would all throw out, yes, but saying the growth and the ecosystem and the space, and if you understand the space and they'll give you an hour-long thing, but it's like, but it seems obvious that it's not going to work. And then when it doesn't work, usually the people that make the decisions don't pay the price. It's the people that get laid off because of those decisions. So to me, this is just a microcosm of corporate thinking, which is like, let's do an obviously terrible thing and talk about how great it is. And then when it proves to be obviously terrible, Jeff Shell's probably just going to make a whole bunch of money. He gets to stay on the board. He'll get richer and nobody will learn anything. It's like the end of Burn After Reading. What do we learn? Nothing. Okay, well, let's move on. So that was my anti-corporate screed for the day. I'm sure there will be another one next week because they keep doing stupid things. It's just, so annoying. Okay. So those are the two stories that I had prepared for you today. We're already, 27 minutes in? That's not such a bad recap of the news. I will get to your questions up next, but I want to thank, we have two sponsors for the show this week. So I want to give them some love and give them a shout out. Thank you to our sponsors, Mando and Factor. We're going to hear a little bit about them and we'll be right back. This video is brought to you by Factor. Picture this. It's been a long day, you're tired, you want to eat something healthy, but wouldn't it be so much easier to eat something fast and not healthy? Well, now you don't have to choose because Factor provides delicious meals that are quick and easy to prepare and that are also healthy. My schedule is pretty insane for most of the year. Days on the road, late night driving, all night edits. And it's great to know that I always have a healthy, quick, delicious option right there in my fridge whenever I am able to eat. Factor has meals that are built around whatever your goals are, whether that's eating lean, eating more veggies, or upping your protein. They even have a Muscle Pro collection for strength and workout recovery. One of my favorite options is on the menu for next week, the green chili queso burger. I'm a big fan of peppers with just about any meal, and that really hits the spot. Factor meals are fresh, never frozen, with over 100 meals rotating weekly, and they're delivered right to your door and ready to eat in 2 minutes. I love being able to eat no matter what time of day it is or what my schedule's like, knowing that I'm still able to hit my own personal goals when it comes to diet and nutrition. Head to factormeals.com/Murrell50off and use code Murrell50off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with a new subscription only while supplies last until 9/27/2026. See the website for more details. Once again, that's factormeals.com/Murrell50off and the code Murrell50off. This video is brought to you by Mando. Spring is in the air, and in Arkansas, that means that the humidity is rising along with the temperatures. We get about a month of nice spring weather before it starts getting sticky, which means that we are making the transition from sweater weather to sweating weather. Luckily, I'm fully stocked up with Mando year-round to keep me smelling fresh. Mando is a whole-body deodorant that's proven to block odor all day and control odor for up to 72 hours. I'm an everyday user of the whole suite of Mando products: body wash, spray deodorant, stick deodorant, wipes. You've been hearing me talk about it on the channel for so long because it works. We had a kids versus coaches soccer game the other night, and I'm not going to lie to you, I was drenched in sweat by the end of it. The only problem was I also had a movie to go to right after it. But with Mando, I didn't worry about it. I didn't worry about stinking up the theater, and that's because I trust Mando to do its job. All Mando products are baking soda free and paraben free, and it's clinically proven to control odor better than Old Spice. So what are you waiting for? Some men mask their BO with sense. Mando men get the job done right. Don't mask it, Mando it. Available in retailers near you, or head to shopmando.com because for a limited time, new customers get 20% off site-wide with my exclusive code. Use code DAN at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide. That's shopmando.com. Please support the show and tell them that I sent you. Mando's got you covered with deodorant plus sweat control. Say goodbye to sweat stains and hello to long-lasting freshness. All right. Thank you to Mando and Factor for sponsoring this episode. Just looking through some of your comments. Peter Saunders says, will you be back on Movie Fights? I would love to be back on Movie Fights. If they invite me back and we can make the schedules work, I absolutely would love to go back. But no plans as of now. Smash Potato says, running a company into bankruptcy can earn you your next job. I can tell you from experience, not that I've done it, but I've seen it happen. Yes, it absolutely can. Colbert should just make a podcast and people will follow him unless he already has one. I'll be interested to see too. I know he's doing the Lord of the Rings thing and writing that movie, but I'm going to be very curious to see what Stephen Colbert does after the Late Show and after everything is done regarding Lord of the Rings, because I'd love to see him go back to, let's go back to back with John Oliver on HBO. Why not? Or maybe consecutive nights. He can do whatever he wants to do, but I think he's a really funny person. And honestly, in my opinion, I think he was kind of shackled by the late night format. I think that he was at his funniest when he was on the Colbert Report. I know he was playing a character, but I felt like I never found him as funny on the Late Show as I did on Comedy Central. And I think he's a very, very, very funny person. All right, let's get to some of your super chats, and we'll start with Rochester Producers 8847. This one came in half an hour before the show started. Says, Dan, I've been sort of obsessed with your Mark Wahlberg impression from the last live. We got to get you in the studio for some fresh Marky Mark tracks. Word to your mother. It's so funny. I very briefly did a Marky Mark thing, Mark Wahlberg thing on my show a couple weeks ago. And I honestly thought it was played out because I used to do it all the time on Screen Junkies. It kind of felt like I thought people were probably sick of it, but yeah, it's just one of those things. I'm not a master impressionist. There's a few that I think I can do all right. And really, I mean, the Mark Wahlberg thing it is actually pretty close to Mark. A parody of Mark Wahlberg is pretty close to the actual thing, and it all comes from The Happening. Any Mark Wahlberg impression that I do on the channel, it's all from The Happening. It's all from the very breathy performance in that M. Night Shyamalan movie. I'm just going to talk very quietly, but he's such a parody of himself. And then the Andy Samberg impression that say hi to your mother for me. That's such a good impression of Mark Wahlberg. I think he's one of the easier ones to do because he doesn't really have a weird voice. His voice is actually pretty normal. It's just about intonation and how you space your words out. And it's a bit Christopher Walken-esque. But I'm glad you enjoyed it because I figured people would get sick of it because it was overplayed. Bronze Tiger Mask says, Dan, have you watched or are you planning to review Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie? It's the best comedy of the 2020 so far. I think this is probably the movie I have been asked, not probably, this has been the movie that more people have asked me about this year than any other movie. I don't currently have any plans, and I didn't see it because I'd certainly heard of Nirvana, the band, the show before, but I never watched it. And so I didn't think about going to see the movie because I'd never seen the show. And I know people say, well, you don't have to go see the show to see the movie. And that's usually what people who are fans of a show say about a movie is like, no, you totally don't have to see it to go see it. But I feel like you kind of do. And for a movie that, I mean, it did well for the size of its release, but it wasn't a blockbuster by any means. But I've had more people ask me about Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie than any other movie this year. No, I don't have any plans, but I admire the fan base for that show, and it must be pretty good to have so many people be so enthusiastic wanting me to talk about it. It's just that I'm really not up on anything about it. I would like to personally have that background because I would like to enjoy the movie, knowing a little bit about what I'm getting into. Owen Rom 2157 says, thoughts on Dune 3 70mm IMAX tickets selling out. That's great. I mean, I wish there was a 70mm theater anywhere near me. I think the closest one is 5 hours away. And it's just, as much as I would love to do it, I just can't. I'm going to need to see it early anyway. I'm probably going to have to travel most likely 5+ hours to see it, if they even do advanced screenings. As I've said on this show many times, more and more movies aren't even doing advanced screening links, at least not in any of the markets that are near me. Devil Wears Prada 2, I think I got an email saying no screenings or links planned in advance for critics in either Kansas City or St. Louis, which are the two markets where I usually go. The way it works is I had to choose between only Dallas or Kansas City and St. Louis, and Kansas City so much closer that I chose that one. But more and more movies aren't even doing advanced screenings for critics in smaller markets because as critics that aren't based in New York or Los Angeles, we're less important and less talented than the ones in Los Angeles and New York. That's just how it works. So I think it's great. I love that we have filmmakers like Denis Villeneuve who are getting people excited to go see movies on the big screen and good movies on the big screen. I hope Dune 3 is good. I know that Odyssey tickets reportedly have been selling like crazy. It's great. I love that a movie's not coming out for 8 months, 8+ months, and they're already selling out. And I think it's because Denis Villeneuve has proven time and time again that the experience is going to be worth it. Dylan Simmons 2278 says favorite Toy Story film. Ooh, oh man, I think that it's probably 2. I have a great affinity. Well, or is it 3? It might be 3. I think 3 is the one that hit me the hardest. But 1 I have a great connection to because it came out when I was 12. And I really liked it, and I remember going to see it with my family. 2, I think, is really great, but overall effect, I guess I'd probably have to say 3. Caden Prowse 8079 says, "Is there some lore behind your fear of frogs? I got a kick out of learning that 2 weeks ago, and now I want to know if there's a reason." As best I can remember, somebody as a prank when I was a kid, and it wasn't a mean prank. I had and I don't think this is the only reason, but I had a Mickey Mouse tackle box when I was very, very young, and I think one of the lures in it was a little rubber frog, and I think somebody tied a string to it, like fishing line, and pulled it across the floor for me when I was a kid because they thought it would be fun and funny. Which, by the way, it should have been, but I think that terrified me. And I think that kind of started it. And plus, I'm kind of a wimp with a lot of creatures anyway, slimy or stingy or snaky. So I think that's part of it. But I think that might have been the origin of it. I was so young, though, I don't really remember it clearly. It could just be something I made up in my head. G Sarngad said, "Snake resistant. Don't invite the wrath of the whatever from high atop the thing." West Wing reference. Well, it's. Most people would probably need to know that was a West Wing reference, but that is one of my favorite West Wing moments. Toby Ziegler quotes, "You're going to invite the wrath of the whatever from high atop the thing." Oh, peak West Wing is some of the best television ever made. Great reference. I know that it is definitely tempting fate to say that my house has been snake-proofed. I will say it has been snake-proofed as much as a house can be snake-proofed, other than encasing it in a steel box with no entry or exit points. Goss 333 became a YouTube member. Welcome. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the member polls, early access to some of my stuff, and just hanging around and being a member. Thank you. Dylan Fitzsimons 2278 says favorite Simpsons character. Oh, geez. We're ranking again. It's impossible because every Simpsons character has a top 5 moment, every single one, and the focus shifts so much. Plus, it would be boring and say, "Oh, it's Homer." Yeah, of course, it's probably Homer for most people. Sometimes it's Barney. Barney has some absolutely brilliant moments in the show. It may be a cop out, but I can't say that I have one that's consistently my favorite because every single character has a top 5 moment of the show for me. So it's one of the most, especially, I haven't watched it recently, but the golden era, I think everybody was fantastic. So I can't narrow it down. It's just too good. Leon Kuwata 4510 says, "Do you think Shelby Oaks was profitable with an $8 million gross against a $2 million cost? And don't horror movies usually spend way more to market it than to make it?" Well, generally, yeah, a lot of horror movies have budgets so low that marketing is more than the actual cost to make the movie. I think it probably was. I mean, I don't know the financials. A lot of it came from Chris crowdfunding the project. So I don't know how you judge profitability when the money coming from a bulk of the budget was through crowdsourcing. How do you judge that as being profitable or non-profitable? But I think probably Shelby Oaks eventually turned a profit because it was a very uh, low cost film. So yeah, I think probably. I don't think it was a massive moneymaker, but I think it probably broke even or will as it's in the secondary market. Sam H6845 said, "What did you think of the Invite trailer?" Well, I was in a very privileged position with the Invite because I saw it at Sundance, and I went in as I go in with all the movies, as everybody does with most of the movies at Sundance. I went in completely blind because it premiered at Sundance, and so nobody had seen it, and I didn't know what it was about other than Seth Rogen and Olivia Wilde have a dinner party, and Edward Norton and Penelope Cruz show up. So all of the twists and turns in the movie were completely new to me. Now, I do think that the trailer, having seen the film, I will tell you the trailer did not give away so far the best parts of the movie, and it kind of hinted at, it gave you enough to put together what the premise of the film is. But I understand you have to market the film, so you have to give away stuff about the movie, and I think it did it about as well as you can do it. But I wish that there's a way to market it and also to not even hint at where the movie goes, because it was so delightful to have that happen organically and for that to sort of dawn on the characters and the audience exactly what was going to happen next. But I will say I acknowledge the realities of marketing a film, and I think that so far, and I'm sure it will go back and blow this with the second trailer or whatever, I think that so far it's done it about as well as you can do it. I hope that people see it. It's a really funny movie, even if you know the premise. Ferris EB says, excuse me, a very generous super chat. Thank you. I can't convince myself not to boycott all titles from Paramount and Warner Brothers going forward. I want the industry to succeed, but I can't monetarily support these evil owners. Boycotts don't work, though. Any thoughts of what might? Well, I mean, I think boycotts can work. It's difficult with art. It's difficult with movies because, yes, if Dune or a movie from Paramount succeeds, then you are supporting that studio and you're supporting the executives and you're supporting the parent company, but you're also supporting the artists. You're supporting Denis Villeneuve. You're supporting the cast. You're supporting the visual effects artists whose work gets a boost the more people that see it. You're supporting a lot of people who in success will get more job opportunities, will get more of a chance to practice their craft. And you're supporting the industry overall as well. You're supporting theaters when you go see a movie. You're not just supporting the studio, you're supporting theaters. So I do think boycotts can work. I think that there have been plenty of times with boycotting products, and certainly going back to the civil rights era, where boycotting has been an effective way to protest. But I think it gets more complicated when you talk about protesting films, because the studios are not the only vested party. I'm not going to say whether you should or shouldn't do it, because that's your own decision to make. And I honestly see people either way. I generally don't boycott films, even if I have major problems with the ownership or even the filmmaker. If I don't agree with, if the filmmaker's done something that I'm not particularly a fan of, but that there are also so many other people involved in that project whose work I would also be boycotting. So I think it's tricky with movies and with art in general, because it's such an interconnected web of interested parties. But I would push back on the assertion that boycotts don't work, because I think that they can work. It's just a much more complicated series when it comes to movies. But if you do what feels right to you, if you don't want to support Paramount and Warner Brothers and the people that run that studio, and you just feel like you want to boycott, then do that. Do what feels right to you. There are certainly businesses, there are YouTube channels, there are other things that I enjoyed or have enjoyed in the past that I don't watch or that I don't buy because I don't agree with their business practices. That's not me thinking that it's going to do any good. Me getting rid of my Twitter account, or X account as it is, it had zero effect on Twitter or X. Nothing about the way they did their business changed. I just didn't like the direction that company was going, and I didn't want anything that I posted on that platform to support directly or indirectly through advertising or driving people to their platform, the direction the company was going. So the only person that cost anything was me in visibility, in social media. This is my biggest social media platform by far. Maybe it would have been smarter to just keep the account and not post on there, but I wanted to get rid of it altogether. I didn't do that because I thought that it would do anything to the company. It was just a personal decision that I made. And so I think that's what it should be with boycotts. If that's the action that you feel is you practicing your free speech and opinion, etc., then I'd say do that, and don't worry about. But it isn't going to do anything. Just do what feels right to you. Take the action that you think is appropriate. I got Wheels 18 says, can we get an If I Ran Star Trek? That's an interesting one. Maybe. I mean, I guess we're at a point now where it's in such a state that I could pretty much start from scratch. So yeah, I'd say maybe. That's a definite maybe, because I certainly have ideas. Real Serious says, sounds like Comics Unleashed isn't that unleashed. Yeah, that's Norm Macdonald's point. You couldn't be more leashed. I love Norm Macdonald. Andre the Turtle 4222 says, with Adam Wingard directing the Face Off sequel, who would be a good choice to take over directing? If Cage and Travolta do not return, which two actors would work best to play those roles? I'll just say this. There's no point. I don't think there's any point in making a Face Off sequel to begin with, quite frankly. I can't think of a scenario where I would go like, oh yeah, that's a good reason to bring that movie back 25 years later or 30 years later at this point. If Cage and Travolta don't return, there's even less reason. The only reason to make a Face Off sequel would be to see what John Travolta and Nicolas Cage are going to do. If you don't get those two back, it is pointless. It's useless. Go make something else, because it's not just that Face Off worked because of the concept. The concept is ridiculous. And with two different actors, I don't think the movie would have worked. You had that specific alchemy between Nicolas Cage and John Travolta that worked, because I don't know what both of those actors were doing, but whatever it is, it worked for that movie and only that movie. Without Travolta and Cage coming back, there's no point. And I don't think there's any point anyway. It's my personal opinion. Bob Duncan 6960 says, with Demi Moore and Amy Madigan having recent success at the Oscars, do you think Toni Collette would have won the Oscar for Hereditary now? No. If she had been nominated for Hereditary, then I'd say maybe, but she wasn't even nominated. I know that, with Amy Madigan, Weapons is a horror film. Substance, is categorized as a horror film, and I understand how it could fit into that categorization. But I still don't see them nominating Toni Collette. Madigan was nominated in the supporting category. I think roles in horror films and those kinds of roles are easier to break out in supporting. And Demi Moore, again, The Substance was not I guess Hereditary wasn't really a straightforward horror film either, but I think that there was just so much engaged with Demi Moore's performance that the Oscar voters didn't feel bad, or they felt like, The Substance broke through where Hereditary didn't. So no, unfortunately I don't. I wish that wasn't the case, but if she'd been nominated and not won, I'd say maybe, but I don't know if there would be enough now to nominate her. I wish there had been. I would love it. Tully Quinn says, which Starfleet captain, not necessarily your favorite, would you most want to serve under, and why not the alternatives? And what would be your department/uniform color? Ooh, what a great question. So I think, and this is probably my next generation bias showing, but I think I would want to serve under Captain Picard, because he held the lives of his crew in such esteem. I love Kirk, but he was reckless, and he with hundreds of lives. Captain Picard held the lives of his crew in such esteem, and he was somebody who I feel like genuinely cared about every individual on board that ship, and also somebody who I feel like, if I were not part of the senior staff, I don't know if I'd be on the bridge crew, but if I were given the opportunity to ever interact with him, I feel like no matter what my interests were, that he and I could have a conversation, whether it was literature, archaeology, morality, the arts, music. I mean, he was a man of culture, and I feel like that he and I would be able to engage on a level beyond just the captain crew relationship. So I really do think it would be Captain Picard, because I would genuinely feel like my life was in safe hands in a very dangerous space, the final frontier. Second to that, I think it would probably be Captain Janeway, just because, I don't think that she had quite the same amount of just. Captain Picard cared for every member of his crew, and I think that Captain Janeway did too, but she would fight for every member of the crew. I mean, tooth and nail. And you want a champion like that. So I think Picard, and then probably Captain Janeway. And again, like with Kirk, I would say he was just too reckless. I would feel like that I was constantly at the whim of whatever's like, oh, Mr. Spock, let's try this maneuver. Well, Captain, there's a 97% probability belonging to the ship. Come on, Spock. Have a little faith. I just feel like you're playing with my life here. So I just don't think Kirk would be my first choice. What would be my department or uniform color? Well, I'm not good at math or science, so I don't know if we're going next gen color coding, I don't know if the science department blue or the engineering yellow would be for me, because I'm not particularly great at math or science. Maybe I could do some sort of analysis that wasn't math heavy, or maybe math has kind of been replaced in the time of the Enterprise, but I'm not good with like machinery. So I would say probably blue, but more than likely I would be I would have a red uniform. I think that I would probably be in like some sort of administrative position, not necessarily a huge position of authority, but some kind of administration, the system, et cetera, the boring jobs, because that's generally what I tend to be drawn toward. That's a great question. Thank you for that. Emir Hades 3211 says Mount Rushmore of insane 21st century media stories. Well, there's so many to count. I mean, MoviePass has to be on there. MoviePass is on the Mount Rushmore of insane 21st century media stories forever. This is very clever, Emir, because this is really a ranking question disguised as a Mount Rushmore question, which means that now I have to go through my Rolodex and think of all the insane entertainment media stories. But MoviePass has to be on there. No matter what else is on there, MoviePass has to be on there. I mean, that's really the first one that jumps to mind. Is MoviePass. Just every stage of MoviePass. MoviePass should have its own Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. Dylan Fitzsimmons 2278 says thoughts on Bill Burr as an actor or comic. I enjoy Bill Burr. I mean, I think that he's very real, and he doesn't always. I don't always necessarily agree with his point of view or his opinion, but I think that he is unapologetically himself, and he doesn't really worry about how anything that he says is going to be. How are people going to react, or what are people going to? He's just very much himself. I've watched a lot of his stand up that just makes me laugh hysterically, and then there's some stuff where I'm like, yeah, okay, I get what you're saying, but it's a little too much for me. But I think that that's okay. I mean, if you're trying to be, it's like Comics Unleashed. If you're trying to be a comic that pleases everybody all the time, then I don't think you're going to be a very funny comedian. You might be popular, but I don't necessarily think you're going to be funny or groundbreaking. As an actor, I mean, he's got a very specific kind of character that he can play. I saw him actually on stage in Glengarry Glen Ross. He played Moss, which is the part played by Ed Harris in the movie version, and I thought he was really good. I thought that character played very well to his energy, his specific energy. So I think if you cast him in the right part, he could be very good. And I often find him very funny, and it's okay if you don't always agree with your favorite comic or your favorite movie critic or whatever, as long as in general they're sort of your vibe or your thing. That's really all that matters. Geek Factor says, hi Dan, so Jonathan Majors was shooting his Daily Wire film. What a sentence. Sorry. So Jonathan Majors was shooting his Daily Wire film and fell out of a window. When asked for comment, Daily Wire said they don't negotiate with communists. WTF? Do you think it will be a comeback for Jonathan Majors? Not really. I mean, that story has been so complex and multi-layered, but I think that there was a path for him to mount a more mainstream comeback, but he hasn't really shown an interest to me in that path. It's more just like, kind of deny responsibility and then kind of bemoan the fact that you're not being hired anymore. Um, does it shock me that the Daily Wire that the Daily Wire producers and crew likened talking to union workers who were concerned about safety concerns on a set as negotiating with communists? No, that does not surprise me whatsoever. Um, no, I mean, it'll be, I guess, a comeback from not working at all, but I think it'll have a very limited and passionate audience, honestly. That's not to say he can't make a comeback, but I think that there are just some steps that need to be taken that haven't been taken yet. In my personal opinion, I think I'm not against being able to say, hey, listen, I did some stuff and it wasn't great, and here's what I've done, and here's why I think, you know, I deserve or I should get another chance. But in my opinion, I haven't seen that from him. Anything that the Daily Wire said or did, no, that doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I saw that video, by the way. If you didn't see it, Jonathan Majors is doing a movie for the Daily Wire, and there was a stunt with some glass that was set up for a later stunt, and he and the other actor fell through that and out of a 6-foot window. And there were some crew members that had already been sort of not happy with the safety conditions on the set, and there were also people that were trying to flip the shoot from union to non-union, and the producer and director of the film called them communists. Not shocking. Spencer Singh 1996 says, who would you love to see do a guest spot as a parody of himself in an upcoming episode of The Studio? I'd love to see Christopher Nolan's chops. Christopher Nolan I think would be pretty good. I think that you have to be, it's not just that you're playing yourself. I think you have to be good at playing a version of yourself. Ron Howard did it brilliantly in the first season, where he's playing himself. He's playing Ron Howard, but he's playing this version of Ron Howard that is such a dick. And it totally turns what you think of Ron Howard on its head. And it helps because he started as an actor. And I think that Martin Scorsese did a pretty good job playing himself, where it's just like he's himself, but he's also sort of this pathetic old man version of himself who's just so needy. And I thought that he played that very well. So I think that you would have to have a Christopher Nolan who's, are his chops good enough that he would be playing some sort of heightened version or unexpected version of himself. I think he probably has it in him, but I'm not entirely sure if he'd be interested in doing that. I would love to see it. I'd absolutely love to see it. You have to play like a caricature of yourself. So, Nolan could be good. I'm trying to think of a director that might be able to fit that. Like Zack Snyder, for example. I think Zack Snyder would be great on The Studio because he seems, despite what some of his movies may show, he does seem very self-aware to me, and somebody who wouldn't mind playing into the joke and doing ridiculous stuff. So I think he'd be somebody who was good on The Studio because I could see him being willing to play this heightened, crazy version of himself and also pull it off. Gossi 333 says, do you have any movies or TV shows that are based on other IP that you wish they could remake closer to the original IP? I love Resident Evil, but have lost hope on a faithful live action adaptation. I've said this so many times. The Shining is one. The Kubrick movie's great in its own way, but kind of far away from the source material. I mean, Zach Cregger, I think, is doing Resident Evil, right? And I've heard good advanced buzz on that. So maybe your hopes will be realized. Nothing. The Rolodex questions are tough. Nothing really springs to mind, but I think that you can depart from the sources or the origin of source material. Jurassic Park, for example, is way less science-y than the original novel, but I think it's great in its own right. You just have to be good in your own respect. And sometimes you can get a good movie that departs from the source material that dramatically, but oftentimes there's a reason why, and it doesn't necessarily work. Dylan Fitzsimmons 2278 says, thoughts on The Passion of the Christ? Oh man, I don't know if I'm ready to share such a hot take. That's not an attack on you. It's been a while since that movie came out. I will tell you this. The Passion of the Christ is a big reason why I ended up writing movie reviews for the campus newspaper at Florida State, which I did for, I think, 2.5 years. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen it, and I was frustrated because the main critic in the newspaper, I was the junior critic for a while. I became the lead critic in my senior year, but the main critic reviewed it strictly from a biblical standpoint and gave it like a glowing review. And for me, when I saw it, I understood its power through the religious lens, and it's undeniably a powerful film through that lens. But I felt like the movie itself wasn't as strong as that review had painted it again through the solely religious lens, because I felt like it was kind of an incomplete story. It did focus on the brutality, I thought, to me, to a distracting degree. It's undeniably effective filmmaking, and Mel Gibson made exactly the movie he wanted to make. But I felt like that there were some shortcomings that weren't mentioned in that review because it was only seen through one particular lens, and I felt like I had a differing opinion on it. And I asked, hey, could I write like a second look or a second opinion review on Passion of the Christ? And they said, no, you can't do that. But it led to me advocating to keep writing more reviews. And I think that eventually resulted in me kind of graduating up to that top spot as senior film critic, which, that's what I still do today. So as a critic, as a burgeoning critic at the time, it was very, kind of a milestone movie for me, because it helped me to develop that sense that I still use of viewing a movie through a particular kind of lens and not getting too short-sighted, and being able to see a movie from multiple perspectives. But I think it's not really a movie I particularly want to watch again. It is so brutal. And I know that that's the point of the movie, but I thought overly so. I thought it was to a distracting degree. But having said that, I always said I thought the movie would have worked better if it was part of a series of movies where the whole story wasn't just that, where you cover the entire life of Jesus. And Mel Gibson appears to be branching out into that. So maybe as part of a bigger whole, it'll be a little bit less distracting for me. But it just was so tough for me to watch. Real Serious says, Dan, what do you think about the studies that say Gen Z is the most movie-going audience? I don't. I'm happy, but I mean, are they going to the movies the most out of any generation? I think generally, first of all, younger people are. I think if you were to go back to studies, younger people have probably always been the most frequent movie-going audience because they have the most free time, and most of the movies are sort of aimed at younger audiences. We're talking, 13 to 21. But I haven't seen the particular study that you are referring to, but I would love, it does seem like there is a return amongst younger people, the young folks, your Gen Zs, and now your Gen Alphas, to head back to that analog way of doing things, because everything is so saturated and we're getting screwed over by digital rights and streaming services and everything. And people are just saying, like, screw that. I want an experience. I want something that I can haven't hold in my hands, or I want something that I can experience with other people. I think that that's great. I mean, whichever way corporations swing and the industry swings, there's always a counter reaction to that. And I think that's what we're seeing. It's great. I love that there are young people that are still interested in going to the movies, and I hope that that continues. S Venus 97 says, have you heard of Critical Drinker on YouTube? Yes, I have heard of Critical Drinker on YouTube. He's got a massive channel, many, many, many times the size of this one. His particular programming and style and oftentimes point of view aren't my cup of tea, but he is one of the most successful movie-based YouTubers on the channel. On the platform, and my analytics tell me that there are many members of my audience that also watch his channel. So yeah, I've heard of him. And like I said, everybody has their own creators that they connect with. He's not necessarily one that's up my alley, but I understand that there's a lot of people that love him. So yeah. Wells 009 says, are you afraid your live streams will be less exciting now that there's a lower chance of a surprise snake attack? If less exciting live streams are the price I pay for no snake attacks, I will take that gladly. Clay7729 says, hey, Dan, fun question. Would you choose to watch Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey again, or argue The Last Jedi for the same duration? I think it'd be way easier for me to argue The Last Jedi for the same duration. And it would be much harder for me to watch Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey again. And I would feel that I did at least something productive with my time, or neutral, instead of lighting another hour and a half on fire watching Blood and Honey. So I would argue that's the only situation where I would happily say, let's talk about The Last Jedi for 90 minutes. Dylan Fitzsimmons, 2278 says, thoughts on the Simpsons movie? Good movie, funny movie. I didn't see it in theaters because I was working that summer on a farm in Missouri doing a TV show called Farmer Wants a Wife, which is not the current iteration that's on TV. It's the one that came before it. And so that whole summer of 2007, Transformers, Simpsons movie, all those movies I didn't see in theaters, but when I did eventually see it, I enjoyed it. I own it. It was good. I liked it. Albert Brooks's vocal performance in that movie is crazy good. Zach Likes Movies 72 says, "Hey Dan, my question is, what is your relationship with film noir as a genre? I've been growing an increasing interest as of late. I love great film noir films, and I love that there are still modern noir films that are made. Double Indemnity is one of my favorite movies of all time. Whenever somebody says, like, if you're gonna show one person an example of what a film noir movie is, what would it be? It would absolutely be Double Indemnity. I also love Billy Wilder, so it's kind of a 2-for-1 for me on that. But yeah, I think that the genre got kind of overdone and has been much parodied, which can sometimes take the power out of the original. But if we're talking Third Man and Maltese Falcon and Double Indemnity and all the classics, and I love finding new noir films that I haven't seen before. But I'm a fan. I think at its best, it's one of the most exciting stylistically and plot wise genres that we have in film. Cam Andrews says, "Hey Dan, like you, I've been watching The Pit, loving watching The Pit. I was wondering what your thoughts are this season so far and how you feel going into the final 2 episodes." Well, without giving away any specific story points in case somebody isn't kind of caught up, I think that it's been good. I really enjoyed the show just because I think that they, apart from the continuing storylines, I think that they come up with interesting scenarios as far as the problems they have to solve. Some of them are kind of funny. Some of them, like the woman who had cancer, are very profoundly moving and very sad. Some of them are just kind of like medical oddities. Like, I think they do a good job of coming up with ways to keep the medical part of it interesting. And because it's an ER, it makes sense why there are so many different things that are happening. I thought overall, plot-wise, it kind of got stuck in neutral a little bit in the middle of the season. Not that it was bad. I just feel like we were spinning our wheels. But this past episode, last week's episode, that final scene, I think, delivered us to the crux of what has been building all season. And I'm so curious to see what happens these last 2 episodes, because it's all, and I think that Noah Wiley's done a very good job as an actor this season. It's all been bubbling under the surface, and it's a little comment here or a line there, and you're like, what's going on with Dr. Robbie? Like, I'm not sure he's okay. Now we have reached the point that conversation you had with Dana. Now we have reached the point where it's on the surface. And I think that hopefully we're in for something really special because the ramifications of that and where the story is going to go, I'm very interested to see. So I think that we're set up hopefully for a great last 2 episodes. AIO fan BLK says, "I've not seen any Nirvana the Show episodes, and I love the movie. Neon will release the show at some point, not available anywhere else. I understand your review, but I'd encourage you to just dive in." Yeah, I mean, listen, I feel like I'm being bullied into going to see the movie, to be quite honest. People are like, "Why have you seen it yet?" I'm sure I will see it at some point. I love good movies, and maybe I'll be wrong. It's just that I want to make sure that I'm maximally enjoying a movie, especially when it's been built up for me so much. So, and also the fact that the show is kind of hard to find can also put up a bit of a barrier. So I understand. I hear you. I hear everybody. Sunil L F4W says, "Avengers Doomsday expectations amid Marvel state." I know everybody wants to prognosticate on Avengers Doomsday. I think it's so dependent on how the movie turns out, on, once we get an actual real trailer for it and word of mouth and stuff like that. I think that it's sort of insulated from the state of the MCU right now. If it's an incredible movie, then I think that it's going to do incredibly well. I just think that it has less leeway to disappoint than earlier Marvel films did. And I think that might be where the state of the MCU affects it. Is it's not absolutely bulletproof. I think it's pretty bulletproof, but if it's really bad, I don't think it has the same kind of insurance that previous Marvel films did. But do I think that it would hurt the performance of the film if it were really good? No, because it's so big and includes so many characters that people love that I don't think people are going to be thinking about, but I wasn't so sure about Thunderbolts. I think they're just going to go see it. So I think all it really does is maybe loosen that threshold for safety that it might have had in the past. Chemo Geo says, glad to hear your house is now snake proof. I share your fear of frogs, and we once had a huge toad in the house. Still have no clue how it entered. I don't like that story. Not one bit. I would have a harder time with that, honestly, than the snake. I'm not going to lie. Leon Kuwata 4510 says, do movies even really need more than one trailer? Most I don't think do. I think the only time a movie should have more than one trailer is when you have a great teaser where it's either stuff that's not in the movie or it's very sort of atmospheric or obscure. And it's really just to sort of build a mystique around a movie. And then if you want to do a traditional trailer, then you can. But I think today I saw there was like another trailer out for Michael, the Michael Jackson movie. And I was like, there have been like 3 or 4 trailers for that movie. Like, no, I don't think any movie needs more than one full-length trailer. I think at most you should have a teaser, which is almost like an announcement of a movie and maybe a couple clips or character reveal or something like that, and one good trailer. That's it. If you can't sell your movie in more than that, then I think you've got bigger problems. Devil Wears Prada 2, I think, has now had 3 trailers. It's like, we need one announcement and one regular. That's it. Rochester Producers 8847 says, this is one of those years where summer box office season feels like it started in March with Project Hail Mary. Thoughts on a successful spring so far? I mean, I'm loving it. And summer is going to be really hard to predict. I was trying to start my predictions this week, and there's a lot of movies that have so much breakout potential. And it just goes to show whenever people are like, movies are dead, theaters are dead. Yeah, I mean, can it be harder to get people into theaters? Yes, but maybe you just weren't offering people what they liked. I know that there were some great movies that didn't find an audience, but a movie being great and a movie finding an audience aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. I think that audiences show that for the right movie, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be good. Super Mario Galaxy movie, critics didn't love, but I think you just have to be able to figure out what audiences want at any particular moment, which, by the way, isn't easy. No studio's ever been able to figure that out consistently. If there was some executive that knew with absolute certainty what audiences were looking for at any given point in time, they'd be the most successful executive in the history of Hollywood. Nobody can figure it out. But I'm happy that the spring has done better because it shows that people will show up to movies that they desperately want to see. Jimmy CJC2. I went to Eads and Pitt and bought Liar's Dice. That I'm a little bit lost on the reference, but I'm glad that you did. How are they different than regular dice? Let me know. Clay 7729 says, if you had to judge, would you say M. Night's career lived up to the hype that was made after his first film? In other words, do you think he's lived up to his potential so far? Well, I mean, listen, M. Night Shyamalan was literally, I think, on the cover of Time magazine or Newsweek, I think when Signs came out, and it said the next Steven Spielberg. So no, by that benchmark, no, he did not live up to the potential that many people kind of threw onto him. I would say no, because he wasn't consistent enough. He had a big hit with The Sixth Sense. He had a big hit with Signs, and there were other movies of his that did well at the box office and a lot that didn't do well. But I don't think that. I think you either have to have consistent success over a short period of time, or you have to have consistent big success. You can be erratic, but you can have big hits over a longer period of time to be considered, one of the greats. And I think that M. Night Shyamalan neither had consistent success over a short period of time. Post Signs, he was very uneven. Nor do I believe he's had big enough hits over a long enough period of time for people to look back on his entire career and be able to kind of weed out the stuff that didn't work as well. And I think that he's sort of, especially in the Lady in the Water era, he kind of got in his own way. I think he believed the hype himself. And I think it also could just be the case where he, as a writer and director, had one brilliant, incredible, captivating idea that everybody loved. And he's had several other good ideas that suffer from not being as great as the one that he had that came out first. I mean, if he'd made Signs and Unbreakable first and then made The Sixth Sense, I think we might look at him a bit different. But on the metric that was set to him as being the next Steven Spielberg, no, he didn't. Is he one of the all-time greats? I don't think he is, but I think that he is an incredibly talented filmmaker that still produces from time to time some really interesting work. Nick Cage 6375 says, can you rank every time "the" was said in Jaws? Just kidding, Dan. I just want to say your videos are great. Thank you very much. I was trying to think if there was a favorite use of "the" in Jaws, but not off the top of my head. But yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Wow, a lot of questions today. Let's go on to Emir Hades 3211 says, my favorite Danism is just do the damn thing. Can you explain where that came from? It's weird because it must just be something I say because I don't consciously remember saying it that often. I don't know if it comes from anywhere specifically. I think it just comes from my frustration that so many studios and so many entertainment companies sort of talk around doing things and beat around the bush and stuff. So just do the damn thing. It's like it seems so easy, and yet you're taking the hardest path possible. Just do the damn thing. That's how I, in my head, can imagine saying it, but I actually didn't know that I say it that often. But it comes from frustration, is what I'll tell you about, because sometimes it's just like, this seems so easy. Why are you making this so difficult? Joseph Herman 9733 says, Ocean's 11 is being re-released in theaters this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on the big screen. Do you have any older films that you haven't been able to see on the big screen? Well, first of all, I take offense of you referring to Ocean's 11 as an older film, unless you're referring to the Frank Sinatra version, which I'm guessing you probably aren't, because this is the 25th anniversary of Ocean's 11, which I did see on the big screen in its original release, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, there are plenty of older films that I've never been able to see on a big screen. Some of my favorites of all time. I'm trying to think of, like, Casablanca. I've never seen with an audience. I'd love to see Casablanca with an audience. Lawrence of Arabia, I was lucky to see. Star Wars, I've seen on a big screen. Jaws, I've seen on a big screen. 2001, I think I eventually did see on a big screen. But those are the ones that I'd love to see. The great epics or the great comedies of our time, I think, are great to see on the big screen with an audience. But there's a lot of Kubrick's work, like Clockwork Orange and Full Metal Jacket. I've never seen on a big screen. Dr. Strangelove, I've never seen on a big screen. I don't think I've ever seen an Alfred Hitchcock film on a big screen. I'd love to see Vertigo on a big screen. I don't think I've ever seen Vertigo on a big screen. Those are the ones that, just the masterworks, because when you watch a masterful film on the big screen, unless you've totally checked out, you will always notice something that you didn't notice at home. And it's such a different kind of experience when it's fully in your field of vision and it's so big and you can see the smallest granular details. That's what I love about it. So yeah, there are plenty. Calypso the Sea Goddess says, currently doing a Spielberg marathon. What are your personal top 10 favorite Spielberg films? Well, I will say that I've had written for a very long time a Steven Spielberg ranked list. So I don't want to give away my top 10 because it could potentially spoil something that could be coming later here on the channel. You do know what my number one is, which is Jaws. I will say that up there, and I'm not going to say necessarily in my top 5 or top 10, but up there would be E.T., Raiders. Catch Me If You Can, I think is probably up in my top 10. Close Encounters is up in my top 10. He produced it, so it doesn't count, but Poltergeist is one of my favorite Amblin films, but it's not a Steven Spielberg film. Color Purple, probably somewhere up there in my top 10. Now I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head. Saving Private Ryan, probably up there in my top 10. Schindler's List, obviously. And, yeah, those are the ones that jump to mind. There's some that I think that are underrated. There's some that are maybe a little bit overrated, but yeah, Jaws would be my number one. I would like to point out that is a ranking question, but I guess I said it with too much peace and love. Geek Factor says, thoughts on reshoots on the Michael Jackson movie to remove the accusations bit. Not saying I was expecting they keep that in, but wouldn't it be nice to see a biopic that doesn't shy away from the dirt? That, I almost talked about that. I actually I was a few minutes late today because I was prepping everything else. This was going to be a story I talked about. So let's talk about it. First of all, it's, I mean, I don't know how much you dug into it, but it's not that the biopic is willfully shying away from the dirt. From what I hear, the original version of the movie went into what happened, the accusations against Michael Jackson. And because the Michael Jackson estate was directly involved in the production, from what I've heard, the movie's point of view was sort of, an innocent man railroaded, was the movie's point of view. But they didn't reshoot that because they're like, well, we don't even want to talk about it. And I don't know how many people have heard this story, but they had to go in and spend. I've heard, 15 million was what was reported this week. I saw that there were other sources reporting much higher, but they had to go back in and heavily reshoot the third act of the movie because the Michael Jackson estate screwed up. There was a provision in one of the settlements with one of the people who accused Michael Jackson, one of the kids and their families, that said that they could not be depicted and the settlement could not be depicted in any work of fiction or anything that was produced, involving Michael Jackson or that the estate was directly involved in. And so they found out after they'd shot the movie, after the movie was done shooting, they found out, oh, wait a minute, legally, we can't depict this according to the terms of this settlement. And nobody flagged it because nobody really remembered this provision. So they had to go back and reshoot the third act of the movie to remove that because of that. And from what I read, the Michael Jackson estate itself actually covered the cost of those reshoots, not the studio, because they were like, that's our bad. We should have flagged this, and nobody did until it was way too late. I know that Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris, has been critical about the estate putting so much money into this movie and into the production of this film. And again, they were reportedly heavily involved creatively in the movie. And so the movie is going to be, unsurprisingly, very complimentary and pro Michael Jackson, but it's not going to cover any of that stuff because legally they realized too late that they couldn't do it. And so they had to go back and reshoot. So it wasn't a case of them kind of having second thoughts. It was just a case of a legal agreement that people forgot about and that ended up costing tens of millions of dollars and delayed the production of the movie. Now they've said that if this movie does well, that they want to do a second part, but I don't know how you do that second part, because if you're doing a movie that focuses on, the post 80s life of Michael Jackson, narratively, not to mention just if you're talking about just the truth of the situation, not to say innocent or guilty, but like the actual facts of the situation. I don't know how you tell the later part of Michael Jackson's life without depicting that. I don't know how that could be done. So I'll be curious to see how this movie turns out. Number one, if you can tell that the third act was heavily reshot. Number two, and number three, if they do make a sequel, how are they going to get around that? And will a movie focusing on that part of his life even be worth making if you just skirt that completely? Because that's, and again, not going into guilty or not, factually, I don't know how you make a movie that does not cover that in some way or shape or form. But one of the all-time, and that's a pretty crazy entertainment. When I read that, that's a crazy entertainment story. The idea that they shot a movie and then months later, somebody from the estate was like, oops, actually, the several rounds of development we've done in this movie and the scripting and the casting and the shooting and now the editing, turns out we can't use any of that. Sorry. That's a nutty story. Dylan Roll 176 says, does the non-MCU Russo track record make you less hyped for Doomsday, or their perfect MCU run make you excited? What wins? Also, you're the man. Love you. Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm not any more or less excited for Doomsday because of what the Russos have done outside the MCU. It seems very overstuffed to me with characters and plot line and just stuff that hasn't really been properly set up. And I think that one of the reasons that the Russos did have, such a successful run in the MCU is that they were able to work alongside and not on the backs of as well, meaning they didn't like exploit the work of other directors, but they were able to use what was effectively set up in other films by other directors, add their own great touches, and create these great pieces of the MCU. And this to me seems much more like we're making it out of whole cloth. We're using characters, but the storyline and everything else is not so much something that's been established progressively over a number of movies. So, the Russos haven't particularly impressed me with anything they've done post MCU, but that doesn't make me go into Doomsday saying like, oh, I don't know about this. To me, it's much more a function of, I'm not sure about Marvel's overall approach to this. And I think the Russos did great in the universe that they set up with other filmmakers. Potter Potty, hi, Alan says, hey, Dan, you mentioned on charts everything coming up this week except the most important show. Taskmaster is back, or Tackmaster. Do you think Kumail will do this season? How do you think Kumail will do this season? Who's the next American you'd like to see on the show? Yeah, I know when I did my preview, I have so many different sources that I look at as far as like what's scheduled this week, movie release dates, TV premiere dates. There's literally like 4 sources. What's coming out on digital this week when I'm compiling for charts, like what to watch. And I was so bummed when I realized I'd left out Taskmaster because it wasn't listed on anything that I was looking at. And I knew that a new season was coming up, but I didn't know the exact date. So I'm super excited for Taskmaster to be back. I think that Kumail is a great pick for the show. I'm very excited to see how he does. How do I think he'll do? I mean, it's so subjective. And I think that the funniest person on the show doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. I think you have an advantage in some tasks, but it's really who has the most kind of outside the box thinking, which was established way early in the show. So I think that it's less, my knowledge of Kumail as a comedian and as an actor, and I need to see more of how he does in any given situation. Like Jason Mantzoukas was never going to win because his mission on every task was chaos, and chaos is great, but it's not a winning strategy. So what is Kumail's strategy? And is he going to do that? Was it Richard Osman type thinking where he's thinking outside of the box? That's what I'm curious to see. The next American I'd like to see on the show. I mean, I think you have to be a very specific sort of person to do Taskmaster. See, I hate sitting here silently and thinking because I just don't think that it's good streaming content. And I hate that word too. I mean, the first name that jumped in my head was Martin Short, and they've had older contestants before. I think Martin Short would actually be pretty funny on the show. So yeah, I'm going to say Martin Short. Alan also says, Potter Potty says, as a fan of British humor, have you seen Last One Laughing? So silly, but one of the most hilarious shows around. Yes, I actually just finished the second series, or season as we call them here, of Last One Laughing, and I thought it was similarly hilarious because I am a big fan of British comedy and British comedians. If you haven't seen it, it's on Amazon Prime Video, and you basically lock 10 British comedians, and these are all, if you know British comedy, these are not unknown people. These are very famous, very successful, very funny British comedians, and they lock them all in a room for 6 hours. And the only goal is that if you laugh, you're out of the game. You get one chance to laugh or smile or chuckle, you get a yellow card. And if you laugh a second time, you're eliminated. And so you basically have 10 hilarious people locked in a room together, trying to make each other laugh. And the rule is that you can't laugh. And because I'm very much on that British wavelength and that British sensibility, I find the show hilarious. Bob Mortimer is somebody who I was introduced to through Taskmaster. I know he's like a comedy legend in the UK, but I was introduced to him on Taskmaster. He's on both series of the show, and I think that he is hilarious. When people ask, what's your type of comedy? That's the type of comedy that really gets me going. Yes, so I love Last One Laughing. They've done the format, and I think it started as a Japanese show, and they've done the format across many different countries. I watched the one from Canada, and I thought it was okay. It wasn't as good. I've tried watching stuff from the other countries, but the UK for me is the best one by far. So yes, I have seen the second season, and I enjoyed it a lot. Clay7729 says, as a critic, have you ever mailed or emailed a vote for a movie or actor that you later regretted? I'm assuming you mean like in a critics poll or like as part of the Emmys or Critics' Choice, etc. No, I wouldn't say that I ever regretted it. No, I mean, if I picked somebody to win an award, it was for a specific reason. So if there was circumstance that came up later, like for example, I don't know if I did, or if I had picked, like, let's say Will Smith to win Best Actor, and then everything that happened at the Oscars, I wasn't like, oh, I wish I had voted for him, because what happened after my vote has nothing to do with why I voted for that person. Or if some revelation came out about that person, then yes, in retrospect, I would do something different. But I don't go back and be like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, because you can only go with what you think at the time and what you know at the time. And I try to be a very responsible awards voter and see everything and make the best judgment based on my own opinion, which is, I think, the most you can ask of an awards voter. So I don't think I've ever regretted a vote that I can think of. Fluffy Pro says, what are your thoughts on the popcorn bucket craze? Have you bought any? What would your ultimate bucket be? I'm looking at 3 popcorn buckets right now on my shelf. I bought one for Jaws 50th anniversary. I have the infamous Dune sandworm bucket. I've got a Batman one. that I bought back when the Batman came out. I think they're fun. They're way too expensive. I mean, they're ridiculously expensive, but if you buy one just because you like that movie or you think it's a cool design, I think that's fine. I mean, I bought, I think 3 or 4 total. It's crazy to me that there's people that buy all of them and they buy like 2 of every one, because like that kind of money is like, that's hundreds, thousands of dollars a year. And to me, it's kind of like Funko Pops, where people would just buy every single Funko Pop. At a certain point, if you're just collecting every single item, then I think it's less of a collection, because some of them are meaningless to you. And for me, the value of a collection, whether that's movies or popcorn buckets or whatever, is what does that mean to you? Not just I own all of a certain thing. So I think it's a fun thing. It's a great extra revenue stream for theaters. I love some of the designs. I think there have been some really creative, fun designs. And yeah, I think it's great. It's fun. I buy maybe one a year, if that. But if I buy it, it's one that I'm going to be super excited about. And like I said, got them over there on the shelf. AIO fan BLK says, Nirvana, no bullying intended on my end. Funny that it's this year's The Long Walk for you. Appreciate all that you do here. Been watching since Screen Junkies. Yeah, I mean, I'm joking about the bullying. It's also funny because so often, and maybe this is kind of what made me hesitate a little bit on Nirvana the band, the movie, Nirvana the band, the show, the movie, is that, if I don't do something right away, I will hear from people. And I'd say maybe 75% of the time, if I say like, okay, I'll do it, I'll review it, then I'll do it and I'll spend the time and do it. And then I'll release it. And it's like one of my lowest performing videos, or it doesn't perform any better than something else that I would have done. And it's like, it's crazy to be like, okay, I'll do it. And then you make this video, you make this review, and you're expecting to be like, okay, people are going to be happy that I did it. And then I did it. And it's just kind of met with a collective like, okay. But on the other hand, sometimes I decide not to do a video and I regret it. For example, like last year, for the first week after K-Pop Demon Hunters came out, I kept seeing comments like, Dan, you got to review K-Pop Demon Hunters. You got to review K-Pop Demon Hunters. You got to review K-Pop Demon Hunters. And I thought it was one of those things where it's like, at that time, it was in the middle of the summer. I forget what else was going on. I was super busy and I was just like, well, it's probably one of those things where people say that I have to review it, but then I spend the time to do it and I do it. And in the movie, and the video just does okay. And I just don't really have time to do it right now. So I ended up not doing it. And that was stupid, because I should have done it, because that would have been maybe my biggest review of the year, that maybe behind War of the Worlds. So that's one of the things with being a reviewer and making stuff for YouTube. You can try to guess what people are going to want to watch, but there's no way to know one way or the other, because, I've done videos that I thought people really wanted, and it turns out the larger audience overall was just kind of about it, or just didn't care at all. And then I've not done videos where I feel like that's going to be the case and they would have blown up. So you just got to make your best guess, and sometimes you're wrong. Page 79 says, when you come to Texas, come over to my deli. It would be my honor. Well, I love delis, Paige. I don't know where you are in Texas, but I enjoy delis. If you're somewhere around the Dallas area, which is where I usually am, let me know. I think we only have a couple questions left, so we're going to draw a line here on the questions. We're already at almost an hour and 40 minutes. So if you have any questions that you haven't sent in, save them until next time. Sakaki Chrono says, hi, Dan. Have you ever been to a 12 a.m. showing of a movie before? And if so, do you think it should happen more often if it fits the film's release? Well, let me tell you, my young summer child, yes, I went to many 12 a.m. screenings of movies, because when I was growing up, I don't know how many of you remember this, there were no Thursday night previews that started at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock. If you wanted to be the first person to see a movie, there was one option, and that was to drag your ass to the theater at midnight, the night the movie opened, and go see it. And not just at midnight. This was in the time, I'm really putting my old man pants on now. This was in a time before Thursday night previews and before online ticket sales. So you would have to camp out probably early to buy tickets, then get there early to get a good seat, then watch the movie at 12 and get out at 2 a.m. So the answer is yes. I saw many, many, many movies at midnight screenings before they started pushing them back earlier into Thursday night. because I was very passionate about those films. I'm pretty sure Star Wars Episode 1, I'm almost positive I did not see at midnight because I was in high school at the time, and I couldn't have. I had some friends that did go see it at midnight, but as I recall, I was not allowed to go to a midnight screening because it was on a school night, because it would have been 12:01 a.m. Friday morning. I had school that day, so I couldn't go see Episode 1. I'm almost positive I saw Episode 2 and Episode 3 at midnight screenings, which we'll talk about an experience at 3 o'clock in the morning when you get home from those movies. Lord of the Rings, I probably saw at least one of them at a midnight screening. Some of the bigger, especially franchise movies, I definitely saw at midnight screenings. So yeah, I absolutely did go to many midnight screenings and did not regret it, because hopefully I wasn't going to be let down. And sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. But there's a certain energy, and I know that there's still energy in these preview screenings that happen now. But like, for example, when a Force Awakens or an Avengers Endgame or something comes out, your Thursday night screenings, there's like one at like 7, 7:30, 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30. Like, they're on Thursday night, but there's several of them. There was a certain feel to a midnight crowd when, like, this is the first screening. It's probably the only screening there's going to be until later that day. So you are the chosen few who were dedicated enough to show up, who were able to buy tickets, who are in the room. You are the very first people. And you also know that you were the very first people to see the movie publicly. Like everybody is experiencing it at 12 a.m., even if it's 12 a.m. East Coast Central Time, etc. Everybody's experiencing it at the same time. And there was just such an energy to that. And I've never felt it since the Thursday night era began, because what happened was that, movies used to start at midnight. So 12 o'clock was the first screening of a movie, and it was midnight, it was midnight everywhere. Well, eventually, especially as the social media era started, it was midnight Eastern, which meant the Central Time Zone started doing it at 11, and Mountain Time Zone started doing it at 10, and Pacific Time Zone started doing it at 9. So all the screenings started at the same time. So they started at midnight Eastern, but they started at 9 p.m. Pacific time. So then, the people on Eastern time were like, well, wait a minute, California's doing it at 9 o'clock. So we're going to start doing our screenings at 10 p.m. Because if California can do 9 p.m., then we can do screenings at 10 p.m. And then the other states rolled back with the time zone. So eventually it just became whatever. We're all just going to start doing it at 5 o'clock on Thursday, sometimes earlier, at which point it's not really a preview screening. It's just another day of release, but it gets rolled into opening weekend. This is all a very long way to say, yes, I did do midnight shows. I loved doing midnight shows. There's an energy that I've never felt again at a different, at any other kind of preview screening, and I miss it. And yes, I think that there's some movies where they should do midnight releases. Leo Bourbon 1994 says, been watching you since Screen Junkies and the start of your own channel. Keep up the great work. Any advice for someone looking to get into being an IMAX projectionist, including learning, 70 millimeter? I mean, that is very elite work. I think that you, more than likely, you need to try to get in contact with somebody at IMAX and start with the most publicly available email address that you can find. And if that doesn't work, try to find a phone number, and don't harass them. Don't ring their phone off the hook or anything like that. But I don't think there's anything wrong with directly contacting IMAX and saying, hi, my name is Leo Bourbon 1994. I am interested in becoming a projectionist. Can you tell me, are there any certifications or qualifications that you require as a company? Or can you put me in contact with the person who would know that, and just go, try to find that information. I think that a lot of times people are hesitant or afraid to do that because, like, well, what if this, what if they don't answer? Maybe you won't find the right person. But I would say if it's something that you want to do, it's obviously, it's specialized work, but specialized work can be consistent work, and it can also be very profitable. I don't know. It may be a very in-demand job. It may not be, but I would say just try to find who to talk to at IMAX about it, and work your way through whatever contact list you can find. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're never going to hear back from anybody, and you're going to be in the exact same place that you are right now. The best thing that's going to happen is you are going to hear back, and you're going to get a contact, and you'll have a roadmap on what you need to do. Or you'll know that, hey, it's not something they're looking for right now. So yeah, just try to find a contact in IMAX and go from there. That's my advice. Give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen? You're right where you are right now. That's the worst that can happen. They're not going to arrest you for asking. So yeah, I'd say do it. And then finally from Paige, the deli's in San Antonio, if you're down in that area. I'm not often down in San Antonio, but if I am, I will let you know. All right. Before we wrap out here, let's see if there's anything. There's so many comments came in while I was answering those. It's so hard to piece through. Let me see if I can just grab a couple. One. Benjamin C and Cheese. Start with just getting a job at your local cinema. Get on the ground experience. I mean, I agree. Experience is good. I just worry that a lot of theaters don't even have projectionists anymore. So I don't know what kind of experience you can get anymore. You got to review K-pop Demon Hunters 2. So build a time machine and go forward in time and review it in its future release. Boy, wouldn't that be great? Oh my God. That would be the edge I'm looking for here in the YouTube movie space. Hey mate, when can we expect the next movie fights from the champ? I am there. The second that fandom calls me and says they want me back, let's work it out on the schedule and let's do it. I'll be there. I missed the old teaser 6 months ahead, full trailer 2 months ahead system. Made it easier to not get overhyped or overstimulated. I 100% agree with that. Let's see. So we wouldn't see Dan Murrell doing movie reviews if it wasn't for the Passion of the Christ. I wouldn't say that. I just think that it was a very important movie that was in my evolution as a film critic. I think I would still be doing reviews. These are just going back through some comments I'm seeing from some of your old questions. Kirk was reckless with his own safety, but I think TOS stories did the best job of showing a captain consult multiple times for a decision, even if it was just Spock and McCoy. Yeah, I agree. To a point. Benjamin's and Cheese says Dan chooses Picard to save his life, then wears a red shirt. Not relevant on the Next Generation, my friend. The whole red shirt thing. Only applicable to the original series. The red shirts were oftentimes the safest, I think, on Star Trek: The Next Generation, or not any less safe. Let's see. Dial up the Dan Gate. We've got a mission. Sorry, I don't know those. I'm just kind of grabbing things that look interesting. Let's see. We'll never get sick of your impressions, Dan. Thank you very much. I think there's some people in my life that would beg to differ. I think that's everything. Yeah, I think that's everything. Oh, one question came in. Sorry, as we were doing two more. Okay, three more. Okay, seriously. I thought we'd put an end to the questions because if I hadn't checked these super chats one more time, I would have not answered these questions. So please don't send any more questions. But we got three more things that came in. But please don't send any more questions because I'm wrapping up the show. Christopher Blackburn says, I have the privilege of seeing Attack of the Clones 12:01 a.m. at Mann's Chinese Theater. Coolest experience ever. I'm sure it was. The Star Wars energy around the prequels, even episode 2 and 3, was very, very unique and fun. Even if those movies weren't the best, it was so much fun because, like I said, I'm almost positive I was a 12:01 a.m. Attack of the Clones person, and I remember there was lightsabers in the crowd. There's still a cheer that went up. That's such a great way to watch a Star Wars movie. Clay7729 says, have you been watching the Artemis 2 mission? Bits and pieces of it. I love that we're, back in space. I wish that things were going as well on Earth as they have been in space. And finally, the Agent Slash says, hey, Dan, can't watch live, but just wanted to show some support and say you're my favorite critic out there and your passion for film is inspiring. Thank you, the Agent Slash. You are free from my criticism for sending in after the deadline because you're not able to watch live. So I appreciate the support. I appreciate the comment. And I appreciate all of you for watching. We're at an hour 47 today, about an hour 45 since I was late. Once again, this show was largely driven by you and your questions. So thank you to everybody who asked such great questions week in and week out. I always get really fun stuff to talk about here on the show. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening to my thoughts on Jeff Shell and corporate culture and Byron Allen and Comics Unleashed and all the crazy stuff that we talked about on the show this week. Be sure to stay tuned. I've got some other stuff planned for the rest of the week. I started it as a potential topic for this show, but it turned into its own video, a look at Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams' production company, which is drastically scaling down. I've already written out, actually, the script for the video. I'm going to be looking at Bad Robot, how it rose to such fame and how it got to where it is right now. And I think it's a really interesting story, so you can stay tuned for that here on the channel. I'm going to have at least one review out this week. Definitely, I think I'm going to watch the Netflix shark movie that's coming out, Thrash, and I might put up my review of that because, yeah, it's a shark movie. We're going to check out The Boys tonight and see how that's looking. We still got a lot of stuff to do here on the channel this week, so stay tuned. If you're a first-time viewer, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell. But thanks for tuning in to this week's live show. No plans so far to push the show next week, so we should be right back here next week for another edition of Dan's World. Until then, stay safe. See you next time. Bye.